I stood there, rain soaking through my black suit, clutching Emily's favorite stuffed bunny as if it were the last piece of her I could hold on to. The graveyard was eerily quiet except for the pattering of rain and the occasional murmurs of people huddled under their umbrellas. Her casket, so impossibly small, too small for a life that should have been filled with laughter and memories, was stark white. It stood out like an accusation against the dark sky. I couldn't take my eyes off it. That was my baby girl in there, my Emily, and I had failed her. You always hear people say that no parent should have to bury their child. I thought I understood that once, before Emily. Now I know I didn't understand it at all. It's not just pain. It's an emptiness that swallows you whole, a gaping hole where love and laughter used to live. It's the weight of all the things you'll never get to see. Emily's first day of school, her first bike ride without training wheels, her nervous grin on her wedding day. All stolen. And now, here I was, standing in the rain, saying goodbye to her forever. I tried to focus on the pastor's words, but they drifted in and out of my mind like smoke. Something about her being in a better place. A better place? What place could possibly be better than in my arms, where she'd spent countless nights falling asleep to my silly bedtime stories? The words felt hollow, meaningless. My fists tightened around the stuffed bunny, the soft fabric now wet from my tears. The whispers started just before the pastor finished his prayer. I didn't need to turn around to know what they were saying. I could feel their judgment like arrows in my back. "Where's Rachel?" they were probably asking. How could she not be here? Her own daughter's funeral? Small towns thrive on gossip, and I knew Rachel's absence would fuel weeks, if not months, of speculation. But none of them knew the truth. Not yet. I had told them Rachel couldn't make it because she was on a business trip. It was a weak excuse, and I could tell most people didn't believe me. The truth was far uglier than anything their imaginations could conjure, though. Rachel wasn't here because she chose not to be. She wasn't here because Emily's death didn't inconvenience her enough to make her cancel her plans. She wasn't here because, well, because she was Rachel. I could feel my mother's eyes on me. She had been a rock these past few weeks, holding me up when I felt like collapsing under the weight of my grief. But even she didn't know the full story. She didn't know what Rachel was really doing while I was burying our daughter. And I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Not here. Not now. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and for a moment, I thought about ignoring it. What condolence message could possibly matter right now? But habit took over, and I glanced at the screen. The photo hit me like a punch to the gut. Rachel, lounging on a chaise by an infinity pool, her tan skin glowing under the Dubai sun. Her smile was wide, carefree, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. Sitting next to her, arm draped casually over her shoulder, was a man I didn't recognize. Young, smug, the kind of guy who looks like he's never had to deal with anything serious in his life. My stomach twisted as I noticed the cocktail in Rachel's manicured hand, the way she tilted her head toward him like they were sharing some private joke. Below the photo, the message read, "Thought you should know where your wife really is today. A concerned friend?" My hands shook as I shoved the phone back into my pocket, as though burying it could make the image disappear. It didn't. The image burned itself into my mind, a cruel contrast to the scene unfolding in front of me. Emily's casket, the rain-soaked mourners, the suffocating weight of loss, and Rachel, sipping cocktails in Dubai like she didn't have a care in the world. "James," my mother whispered, her hand gripping my arm. "You're shaking." I nodded, swallowing hard. "It's just the rain." I knew I should have told her, should have said something. But how do you tell your mother that your wife, the woman you built a life with, the woman who should have been grieving with you, was thousands of miles away, sipping overpriced drinks with her lover? How do you say that out loud without falling apart? I couldn't. Not yet. So, I lied. The service ended, and I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me as I walked to the casket for one final goodbye. I placed the bunny inside, tucking it next to Emily like it would somehow keep her safe in the dark. My chest tightened as I whispered, "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But inside, I was screaming. screaming for Emily, screaming at Rachel, screaming at myself. As the casket was lowered into the ground, I made a silent promise. Rachel might have chosen to abandon us, but I wouldn't. Emily deserved better. And Rachel? Rachel deserved everything that was coming to her. The funeral reception was as suffocating as I had imagined. People shuffled around my parents' living room, balancing plates of untouched casseroles and cookies, murmuring the same hollow condolences. Their words blurred together. She's in a better place. At least she's not suffering anymore. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. Emily wasn't in a better place. She was supposed to be here, clinging to my leg, giggling as she stole one of those cookies. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. What made it worse was Rachel's absence, the unspoken elephant in the room. The neighbors weren't just mourning Emily. They were dissecting the disaster that had become my life. I could see it in their eyes, hear it in the whispers that stopped the second I entered the room. They all wanted to know, where was my wife? Rachel's parents, Diana and Thomas, stood in the corner like statues. They had hardly spoken to me, save for the briefest of condolences that felt more like insults. Diana, in particular, had been throwing me sharp glances all day, like Emily's death was somehow my fault. I knew what she thought of me. She'd always thought Rachel deserved better, and now she probably had her proof. The failure of a husband who couldn't even keep his family intact. Diana finally approached me as I stood by the mantel, staring at a photo of Emily. It was one of my favorites, her gap-toothed grin as she clutched a stuffed bunny almost as big as she was. "James," Diana said, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with sharpness. "You've been so strong today. It's such a shame Rachel couldn't be here, but you know how hard this has been for her." I turned to face her, the picture frame still in my hands. Her words felt like a slap. Difficult for her? My grip on the frame tightened as I fought to keep my voice steady. "I'm sure it has," I said, the words colder than I intended. "Though I imagine Dubai is a nice distraction from all the difficulty." Her eyes widened, her carefully curated mask slipping for just a moment before she recovered. "I beg your pardon," she said, her tone brittle. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I set the photo back on the mantel with trembling hands and walked away. Diana's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just aware of Rachel's absence. She was covering for her. I retreated to Emily's room, needing a moment of quiet, of peace. Her presence was everywhere in that room. The walls were painted her favorite shade of lavender, and her toys were still scattered across the floor, just as she'd left them. I sat on her bed, holding her stuffed bunny, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to cry. Not just for Emily, but for the life I thought I had. For the marriage that had been unraveling before my eyes without me even noticing. When my tears finally subsided, I noticed something on Rachel's desk, a stack of papers, carelessly left in plain sight. That wasn't like her. Rachel was meticulous, always putting things in their proper place. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, drew me closer. The top sheet stopped me cold. A receipt for a luxury resort in Dubai. The dates matched perfectly with her business trip. I rifled through the stack, each piece of paper more damning than the last. Receipts for spa treatments, five-star dining, first-class flights. None of it made sense. We hadn't been in a position to spend that kind of money, especially not with Emily's medical bills. Then I saw it. A charge to an account I didn't recognize, with Rachel's name on it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. Another message. Another picture. This time, it was a video. Rachel, sitting by the pool, laughing as she clinked glasses with the same man from the first photo. Her voice, clear as day, said, "He's probably crying over that funeral. Good riddance." The man laughed, and she leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as if she didn't have a care in the world. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. My grief turned to fury, burning away the hollow ache in my chest. Rachel wasn't grieving. She wasn't mourning the loss of our daughter. She was celebrating her freedom. The door creaked open, and my mother stepped inside. "James," she said softly, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on? You've been acting strange all day." I looked at her, the weight of everything threatening to crush me. But how could I explain it to her? How could I tell her that while I was burying Emily, Rachel was sipping cocktails in Dubai with another man? That the woman she had welcomed into our family had betrayed us all in the most unforgivable way? "I'm fine," I lied, shoving the phone back into my pocket. "Just tired." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. She reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone, James. Whatever it is, we'll get through it together." I nodded, but her words didn't reach me. My mind was racing, piecing together fragments of memories, trying to connect dots I hadn't noticed before. Rachel's late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the way she had been distant and cold, even as Emily's condition worsened. I had chalked it up to grief, thinking she was coping in her own way. But now, I saw the truth. I had been blind. Rachel wasn't just absent. She had abandoned us long before Emily's death. And now, as I stood in the ruins of my life, one thought burned brighter than the rest. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The night after the funeral, the house felt unbearably quiet. Emily's laughter, her tiny footsteps on the hardwood floors, her soft voice singing made-up songs. All of it was gone, leaving an oppressive silence. I sat in the dim light of the living room, staring at my phone. The video of Rachel and her lover by the pool played on repeat, every second twisting the knife deeper into my chest. Her words haunted me, good riddance. I thought the pain of losing Emily was the worst I'd ever feel, but Rachel's betrayal hit differently. It wasn't just about her absence at the funeral. It was the complete, unapologetic joy she radiated in the video. While I was burying our child, she was basking in the sunlight, smiling like she didn't have a single care in the world. That wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. The fury I had been holding back all day finally exploded. I threw my phone across the room, watching as it hit the wall and clattered to the floor. The sound startled me, breaking the silence, but it didn't feel like enough. My hands shook as I clenched them into fists, nails digging into my palms. How could she do this? How could she abandon Emily and me when we needed her the most? The questions spiraled in my mind, feeding the fire inside me. I needed answers. Not tomorrow, not later, but now. I retrieved my phone, the screen cracked but still functional, and scrolled through the contacts. My thumb hovered over Rachel's name. I wanted to call her, to confront her, to demand an explanation, but I knew she'd lie. She always did when backed into a corner. Instead, I opened our shared photo storage account, something I hadn't looked at in months. Rachel had always been careless with technology, assuming I never paid attention to the little details. Tonight, that carelessness would work in my favor. It didn't take long to find the truth. There were photos she had taken during her so-called business trips, images of luxury suites, extravagant meals, and expensive jewelry. Some of them included the man from the pool, his arm around her waist, his face smug and satisfied. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. Every image, every video, every receipt was a slap in the face, a reminder of how blind I had been. As I dug deeper, I found more than just photos. There were bank statements linked to an account I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars spent on flights, resorts, and shopping sprees. Money that should have gone toward Emily's medical bills. My jaw tightened as I realized how far her betrayal went. This wasn't just an affair, it was theft. Rachel had been draining our savings to fund her fantasy life, while I had been scraping together every cent to pay for treatments that might have given Emily a fighting chance. A new notification lit up my phone screen. Another text message from the unknown number. She's not just in Dubai for a vacation. She's planning to stay. Check the receipts. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Whoever this concerned friend was, they knew more than I did. I clicked on the attachment they sent, a scanned itinerary for a flight out of Dubai in 2 weeks. It wasn't a return flight to our town. It was a one-way ticket to Bali. The passenger name? Rachel. She wasn't coming back. The rage inside me solidified into something sharper. This wasn't just about Rachel cheating. She had abandoned me. She had abandoned Emily. And now she was planning to disappear completely, leaving me to deal with the wreckage she created. But I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. The next day, I started piecing together the timeline of Rachel's betrayal. Every late-night call she had brushed off as work, every sudden trip she had claimed was urgent. All of it made sense now. She had been living a double life, using Emily's illness as a cover for her lies. I realized that her emotional distance over the past year wasn't grief, it was guilt. She had already checked out of our marriage long before Emily's diagnosis. I spent hours going through every scrap of evidence I could find, documenting everything. I printed out receipts, saved photos, and downloaded messages. By the time the sun rose, the coffee table was covered in a sea of papers, each one a testament to Rachel's deceit. My grief hadn't gone away, but it had been eclipsed by something darker. Rachel thought she could abandon her family and escape without consequences, but she was wrong. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I knew I couldn't confront her just yet. Rachel was calculating, always one step ahead. If I tipped my hand too soon, she'd find a way to manipulate the situation, to twist it in her favor like she always did. I needed to be smarter, more patient. When my mother came downstairs that morning, she stopped in her tracks at the sight of the mess I had created. "James," she said slowly, her eyes scanning the papers. "What is all this?" I hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's Rachel," I said, my voice cold and steady. "She's not just absent. She's gone. And she's not coming back." My mother's face hardened, her usual warmth replaced by a fierce protectiveness I hadn't seen in years. "What do you need me to do?" Her words caught me off guard, but they lit a spark of determination. "I need help," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I need to figure out how to stop her." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. Together, we started laying the groundwork for what would come next. Rachel thought she could leave us behind without a second thought, but she underestimated me. I wasn't just grieving, I was preparing. She was about to find out exactly what happens when you betray the wrong man. The house was still in chaos from the night before, papers spread across the coffee table like a battlefield. Every receipt, photo, and message I uncovered had been another dagger to the heart, but the truth didn't stop there. I wasn't just unraveling Rachel's betrayal, I was beginning to realize she hadn't done this alone. It started with Nicole, her best friend. Nicole had always been Rachel's shadow, the one who cheered her on no matter what, even when she didn't deserve it. I hadn't thought much of her involvement, but the more I pieced things together, the more I noticed her name popping up. She was listed as an emergency contact on Rachel's hotel bookings, and her email address was used for several of the suspicious transactions. Nicole wasn't just an innocent bystander. She was an accomplice. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the evidence was there. The final straw came when I found a text exchange between Rachel and Nicole buried in the archive of our shared cloud account. Rachel had sent it weeks ago, around the time Emily's condition took a turn for the worse. "Rachel, I can't deal with this anymore. He's falling apart, and it's suffocating me. Dubai is going to be my escape, finally. Nicole, you deserve it. He'll survive. He's too caught up in his grief to notice anything." My hands trembled as I read the messages. Nicole had encouraged her to leave. No, enabled her to leave. She had seen my pain, seen Emily's suffering, and decided it was inconvenient. My anger boiled over, and I decided it was time to confront her. I called Nicole, masking my fury with forced politeness. She answered on the second ring, her tone too cheerful for someone who had just attended a funeral. "James, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice oozing fake sympathy. "I'm surviving," I replied flatly, "but I need to talk to you about Rachel." There was a pause, just long enough to make me suspicious. "Rachel? What about her?" I didn't hold back. "Don't play dumb, Nicole. I know about Dubai. I know about the trips, the money, the man." Her sharp inhale was all the confirmation I needed. "James, I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but the panic in her voice betrayed her. I pushed harder. "Cut the act. I found the receipts, the messages. I know you've been covering for her, helping her lie to me while she parades around with her lover. Do you even feel guilty, or is loyalty to Rachel worth more than basic decency?" Her facade cracked. "James, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I snapped, my voice cold and steady. "Because from where I'm standing, It looks like you've been helping her destroy what's left of our family." There was a long silence, broken only by her shaky exhale. "I told her not to go," Nicole admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told her it was a mistake, but she wouldn't listen. She said she needed to get away, that you were too focused on Emily to notice what she was doing." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. "So you knew she was leaving during Emily's funeral? You knew, and you said nothing?" Nicole didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was defensive. "What was I supposed to do, James? She's my best friend. I couldn't stop her." "No," I said, my voice laced with disgust. "You couldn't be bothered to try." Before she could respond, I hung up. The conversation had confirmed what I already knew. Rachel's betrayal wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was planned, calculated, and carefully executed with Nicole's help. But Nicole wasn't the only one. As I dug deeper, I began to see how far the web of deceit stretched. Rachel had involved others, people I hadn't even suspected. There were emails to travel agents, messages to her lover discussing their plans, and even transactions that hinted at bribes paid to keep things quiet. The more I uncovered, the more furious I became. Rachel had created an entire network of deceit, a team of enablers who had helped her lie, cheat, and steal while I was too blinded by grief to see it. But their carelessness was my advantage. Every email, every receipt, every misstep they made was another piece of evidence I could use against them. That night, I received another message from the unknown number. "It's not just her. She's been pulling strings for months. Check your finances." I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent hours combing through bank statements, credit card bills, and savings accounts. That's when I found it, the hidden transactions. Thousands of dollars had been siphoned from our joint accounts into one I didn't recognize. It was under Rachel's name, and it had been drained just days before her flight to Dubai. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was financial. Rachel hadn't just left me to grieve alone. She had stolen from me, from us, to fund her escape. She thought she could get away with it, but she was wrong. I wasn't just unraveling her lies anymore. I was preparing for war. I thought I had seen the worst of Rachel's betrayal. The lies, the affair, the stolen money. It was all enough to destroy me, yet I kept digging. Something about the layers of deceit felt incomplete, like there was still more lurking beneath the surface. The truth had already shattered me once, but what I found next turned my grief into a burning, unrelenting fury. It was late at night when I stumbled across the email. I had been scouring through our shared cloud account, sifting through years of communication, when a draft folder caught my attention. Rachel wasn't meticulous with technology, but she never left loose ends. That folder should have been empty. Inside was a thread of unsent messages addressed to a life insurance company. My stomach dropped as I opened the first one. The subject line read, "Policy confirmation for Emily Thompson." My hands trembled as I scanned the email, my mind refusing to process the words. Rachel had taken out a life insurance policy on Emily. A $2 million policy. The date it was signed? 2 months after Emily's diagnosis. I read and reread the email, hoping there was some innocent explanation, but there wasn't. Attached was the finalized policy document, her signature bold and proud at the bottom. My name was nowhere to be found. I wasn't even listed as a co-beneficiary. The payout was set to go directly to Rachel. A million questions raced through my mind. Why hadn't she told me? Why would she take out such a massive policy without my consent? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't a safety net for our family. This was her escape plan. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking me out of my daze. Another message from the unknown number. Check the loan history. I opened our joint financial account and found a new layer of Rachel's treachery. There were multiple loans taken out against the policy, each one signed by her alone. Thousands of dollars siphoned out over the past year, with no explanation and no discussion. She had used Emily's life as collateral for her luxury vacations, her affair, her new life. I couldn't breathe. The weight of what she had done crushed me, leaving me gasping for air. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had exploited our daughter's suffering, turning Emily's illness into a business opportunity. I slammed the laptop shut, unable to look at the evidence any longer. It felt like poison, seeping into every part of me. The next morning, I sat in Emily's room, staring at the stuffed bunny she had carried everywhere. Her absence was a physical ache, a void that couldn't be filled. I thought about all the nights I had spent holding her hand, reading her stories, fighting to keep her spirits up even when the doctors told us to prepare for the worst. And Rachel? She had been somewhere else entirely, planning, scheming, pretending to care while laying the groundwork for her escape. I grabbed the bunny and buried my face in it, inhaling the faint scent of Emily's shampoo. "I'm so sorry, baby girl," I whispered. "I didn't see it. I didn't stop her." My voice cracked as the guilt surged through me, but something else rose alongside it: determination. Rachel thought she had one. She thought she could steal from me, from Emily, and disappear into the sunset with her lover. But she didn't count on me finding the truth. She didn't count on me fighting back. That afternoon, I called the life insurance company. I needed answers, confirmation of what I had uncovered. The representative on the other end of the line was polite but hesitant, citing confidentiality. When I pressed harder, explaining who I was and what I had found, her tone shifted. "Mr. Thompson, I can confirm that the policy was taken out by Rachel Thompson," she said carefully. She listed herself as the sole beneficiary and took out several loans against the policy over the past year. "And she didn't need my consent for any of this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "No," the representative admitted. "Since the policy was in her name and on your daughter, your signature wasn't required. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I hung up without answering. My mind was spinning, my anger boiling over. Rachel had built an entire life on the foundation of Emily's death, and I had been too blind to see it. But now, the blinders were off. That evening, as I was poring over the documents again, my phone rang. The number was unlisted. For a moment, I debated ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said, my voice rough. "James," a woman's voice replied. It was unfamiliar but filled with urgency. "My name is Sophia. I'm Brandon's ex-fiancée." Brandon, the man in the photos. The man Rachel had abandoned me for. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my tone cold. "I know about Rachel. I know about the money, the insurance, the loans, and I know what they're planning." My grip on the phone tightened. "How do you know all of this?" "Because I was part of it, at first," she admitted. "Brandon told me everything. He was bragging about how easy it was to manipulate her, how they were going to use the money to build their dream life. But then I realized what they were doing, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. You deserve to know the truth. Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I can prove it," she said. "Meet me tomorrow at the coffee shop on Main. Bring everything you have. We'll compare notes." I hung up, my mind racing. Sophia's call was unexpected, but if she had evidence to back up her claims, it could be the break I needed. Rachel thought she had outsmarted me, but she was about to learn the hard way. She underestimated the wrong man. The next morning, I arrived at the coffee shop on Main, the folder of evidence clutched in my hand like a lifeline. The place was quiet, its cozy atmosphere a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I spotted Sophia immediately, a woman with auburn hair tied in a neat ponytail, her posture stiff and eyes scanning the room nervously. She didn't look like the kind of person who'd willingly get involved in someone else's drama, which only made her presence more intriguing. I slid into the seat across from her, dropping my folder onto the table with a dull thud. She glanced at it, her green eyes sharp and assessing, before finally meeting my gaze. "You came," she said, her voice low and steady. "You have 5 minutes," I replied, my tone clipped. "Start talking." She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "Brandon and Rachel have been planning this for over a year," she began. "It started when Brandon met her at some corporate event. He told me she was married, but he didn't care. She was the perfect mark. Rich, bored, and ready to leave her husband. And then," Sophia hesitated, her expression darkening, "then your daughter got sick, and things got worse." "Worse how?" I asked, my voice cold. They saw Emily's illness as an opportunity, she said bluntly. Rachel took out that life insurance policy, and Brandon encouraged her to use it as a way out. They drained your savings, took loans against the policy, and funneled everything into a shared account. Their plan was simple. Wait for the payout, disappear to Bali, and start fresh. My stomach churned as she spoke, each word slicing through me like a knife. And you just went along with it? Sophia flinched but didn't look away. At first, yes. But I didn't know about the policy until recently. When I found out, I confronted Brandon. He laughed it off, said Rachel was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. That's when I realized I couldn't be part of it anymore. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages before sliding it across the table. The screen was filled with texts and emails between Rachel and Brandon, their conversations dripping with arrogance. Rachel, once the payout clears, we're gone. James is too distracted to notice. Brandon, good. I can't wait to leave this place. Bali's going to be paradise. Rachel, just make sure you keep Sophia quiet. She's been asking too many questions. I clenched my jaw, my hand tightening around the phone. Why are you helping me? I asked, my voice low. Because I want them to pay, she said simply. Rachel used you. Brandon used me. They think they're untouchable, but they're not. I want you to take them down, and I have the evidence to help you do it. By the time I left the coffee shop, my head was spinning. Sophia had given me everything: bank statements, flight itineraries, even a blueprint of their plan. With her information and my own evidence, I finally had enough to expose Rachel and Brandon for who they really were. That evening, I decided to strike. Rachel's parents, Diana and Thomas, were hosting a small gathering at their house, a thinly veiled attempt to show support after Emily's funeral. I wasn't invited, but that didn't stop me from showing up. When I walked through the door, the room fell silent. Diana's forced smile faltered, and Thomas looked as if he'd seen a ghost. James, Diana said, her voice sugary sweet. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't, I replied, my voice steady. But I thought this was the perfect opportunity to share something important. I walked to the center of the room, setting my folder on the coffee table. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispers spreading like wildfire. Rachel's absence hung over the gathering like a storm cloud, and I was about to unleash the thunder. Let's talk about Rachel, I began, my tone calm but razor-sharp. Since she couldn't be here to explain herself, I thought I'd do it for her. I opened the folder, pulling out the photos, bank statements, and texts. One by one, I held them up, my voice growing colder with each revelation. This is Rachel in Dubai with her lover, while I was burying our daughter. Here's proof of the $2 million life insurance policy she took out on Emily without my knowledge. And here, I paused, holding up the texts Sophia had shared. Are there plans to take the payout and disappear? The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and angry whispers filled the air as Diana tried to regain control. This is ridiculous, she snapped, her face red with anger. You're grieving, James. You're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking clearly, I shot back, turning to her. You knew, didn't you? You knew what she was doing, and you covered for her. Diana's eyes widened, her composure slipping. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said weakly. Save it, I said, my voice ice cold. I have all the proof I need. And if you don't believe me, maybe you'll believe this. I pulled out my phone and played the recording Sophia had given me. Rachel's voice filled the room, dripping with disdain. He's too broken to notice. Once the money comes through, we're gone. Diana sank into a chair, her face pale. The other guests stared at her in horror, their whispers turning into open condemnation. Thomas stood frozen, his jaw clenched, unable to defend his daughter. I've already filed a motion to freeze her accounts, I said, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. This isn't just a betrayal, it's fraud, and she will face the consequences. As I turned to leave, I paused at the door, glancing back at the stunned room. Tell Rachel when she comes crawling back that she underestimated me. I'm done being the fool. The fallout from that night at Diana and Thomas's house was immediate and explosive. News of Rachel's betrayal spread through the town like wildfire, fueling gossip that burned away the carefully crafted image of our perfect family. I didn't care. If anything, I wanted people to talk. Rachel had been living a lie for years, and now she would finally have to face the consequences of her actions. The next morning, I met with Marcus, my lawyer and longtime friend. He had been with me through some tough times, but this was different. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. I laid out all the evidence, Sophia's documents, the financial records, the texts and photos, even the life insurance policy Rachel had used as her golden ticket. Marcus flipped through the papers, his expression growing darker with each page. "This is bad," he said finally, setting the folder down. "Really bad. Not just for Rachel, but for anyone involved. Fraud, conspiracy, even elder abuse with what they tried to do to your father. We can take this to court, but it's going to get messy." "I don't care," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I want them to pay. Every single one of them." Marcus nodded. "Then we need to act fast. First, we'll freeze all her assets, joint accounts, savings, even the life insurance payout. We'll also file for divorce, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. If she tries to come back and claim anything, she'll hit a wall of legal roadblocks." "And Brandon?" I asked, my jaw tightening at the mention of her lover. Marcus smirked. "He's a loose end, and we'll use him to our advantage. If we pressure him with fraud charges, he'll fold like a cheap suit. Guys like him always do." The next few weeks were a blur of legal filings and strategic planning. Marcus and his team worked tirelessly, uncovering more of Rachel's schemes. Every new discovery added fuel to my resolve. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had betrayed Emily's memory, exploiting her illness for personal gain. I stayed focused, but the emotional toll was relentless. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of everything pressed down on me, I would sit in Emily's room, clutching her stuffed bunny. It was the only place I felt close to her, the only place I could let my guard down. I would whisper promises to her, vowing to protect what little we had left and to make Rachel face the full weight of her betrayal. The first major victory came when Marcus filed an emergency motion to freeze Rachel's assets. It was approved within days, cutting off her access to the funds she had siphoned away. When the news reached her, she was furious. She called me, her voice dripping with venom. "James, what the hell are you doing?" she demanded. "You froze my accounts? You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "You stole from me, from Emily, and you think you're entitled to walk away unscathed? Think again." "You don't understand," she hissed. "I needed to get away. I couldn't handle." "Don't you dare," I snapped, my anger finally breaking through. "Don't you dare use Emily as an excuse. You weren't grieving. You were scheming. And now, you're going to face the consequences." She hung up, but the damage was already done. She knew she was cornered, and I took satisfaction in imagining her panicked scramble to salvage her plans. The court hearings began soon after. Marcus presented a damning case, laying out every detail of Rachel's betrayal. The life insurance policy, the fraudulent transactions, the emails and texts. It was all there, a web of deceit that left no room for doubt. Rachel's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Brandon, predictably, turned on her. Faced with the threat of criminal charges, he agreed to testify against Rachel in exchange for a lighter sentence. His testimony was brutal, painting a picture of Rachel as a cold, calculating manipulator who had orchestrated every aspect of their scheme. For once, his arrogance worked in my favor. Rachel tried to play the victim, claiming she had been overwhelmed by grief and pressured into making poor decisions. But the judge wasn't buying it. Her crocodile tears only made her look more pathetic. The court ruled in my favor, awarding me sole ownership of our home and ensuring the life insurance payout would be redirected to a trust in Emily's name. The trust became the foundation of something bigger, the Emily Grace Thompson Foundation. Its mission was to support pediatric cancer research and provide aid to families in similar situations. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about ensuring Emily's legacy lived on in a way Rachel could never tarnish. The legal battles left Rachel financially and emotionally ruined. Her reputation was in shambles, and the people who once supported her turned their backs. Diana and Thomas retreated from public life, their influence shattered by the scandal. As for Brandon, he disappeared, no doubt hoping to avoid the fallout of his testimony. But even with the victories, the scars remained. I had won the battle, but the war had taken its toll. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had missed the signs, how I had let things spiral so far out of control. The anger had subsided, replaced by a quiet sadness that I couldn't shake. Emily was gone, and no amount of justice or revenge could bring her back. Yet, in the midst of the pain, there was a flicker of hope. The foundation was growing, touching lives in ways I never imagined. Every grant awarded, every family helped, was a reminder that Emily's memory would endure. She wasn't just a victim of Rachel's betrayal. She was a symbol of resilience, love, and light. In the weeks following the court's decision, the house grew quieter. The chaos of legal battles, the flurry of meetings with Marcus, and the whirlwind of uncovering Rachel's lies had finally subsided, leaving me alone with my thoughts. For the first time in months, I was left to face the raw, unfiltered reality of Emily's absence. The house was still filled with her presence, her drawings taped to the fridge, her favorite books stacked neatly on her little shelf, and the faint scent of her shampoo lingering in her room. I spent countless nights sitting on her bed, holding her stuffed bunny, talking to her as if she could still hear me. It was both comforting and gut-wrenching, a reminder of what I had lost and what I still needed to fight for. The Emily Grace Thompson Foundation became my anchor, redirecting the life insurance payout to fund pediatric cancer research and provide support for grieving families gave me a sense of purpose. It wasn't just about honoring Emily's memory. It was about ensuring her legacy made a difference. The first grant went to the pediatric cancer ward where Emily had spent so much of her time. I visited the hospital the day the donation was announced, meeting families who reminded me of me and Emily during those long, painful months. As I spoke to the parents, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and hope. Their struggles mirrored mine, but now, thanks to Emily's foundation, they had one less burden to carry. It was a bittersweet victory, one that filled me with a quiet pride. My little girl, even in death, was changing lives. One crisp autumn morning, I drove to the cemetery, a small bouquet of sunflowers in the passenger seat. They weren't Emily's favorite flowers. She'd always preferred daisies, but sunflowers had become a symbol of her in my mind. Bright, cheerful, unyielding in the face of darkness. I parked the car and made my way to her grave, the leaves crunching under my feet. Her headstone was simple, just the way she would have liked it, with a small engraving of a bunny in the corner. I knelt down, brushing away a few stray leaves, and placed the bouquet at the base of the stone. "Hey, Em," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "I brought you some sunflowers. I hope you don't mind." For a moment, I let the silence envelop me, the cool breeze rustling the trees around us. "The foundation's doing well," I continued. "It's helping a lot of kids like you. You'd love it, you know? You always wanted to help people." I swallowed hard, my vision blurring with tears. I hope I'm making you proud." As I spoke, a monarch butterfly fluttered past me, landing delicately on the headstone. Its wings shimmered in the sunlight, vivid and alive. I froze, watching it, a lump forming in my throat. Emily had loved butterflies. She used to chase them around the yard, giggling as they danced just out of reach. I couldn't help but smile, even as the tears spilled over. "Is that you, kiddo?" I asked softly, my voice trembling. The butterfly stayed for a moment longer before taking flight, spiraling upward into the sky. I watched it go, a strange sense of peace washing over me. As I stood to leave, I heard the crunch of footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw my father making his way toward me, his steps slow but steady. His memory wasn't what it used to be, but today his eyes were clear, his expression calm. "She's at peace now," he said quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I nodded, my throat too tight to respond. "She told me something once, you know," he continued, his voice soft. "Not long before she passed. She said, 'Don't worry about Dad. He's stronger than everyone thinks.'" His words hit me like a lightning bolt, tears streaming down my face. She said that? He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She did, and she was right. We stood there in silence, the weight of grief and love mingling in the crisp air. After a while, he broke the quiet. What do you say we go get some pancakes? The question caught me off guard, but it brought a small, genuine smile to my face. Pancakes, huh? Emily always loved pancakes, he said simply. I laughed through the tears, the bittersweet memory warming my heart. Yeah, she did. Back at the house, the quiet no longer felt suffocating. Instead, it felt peaceful. Emily's room remained untouched, a sanctuary of her laughter and love, but the foundation had taken on a life of its own. Every time I saw the name Emily Grace Thompson on a grant application or heard from a family the foundation had helped, it reminded me that her spirit was still alive. She wasn't just a memory, she was a force for good in the world. As I sat in her room that evening, her bunny in my lap, I whispered a final promise. I'll keep going, Em. For you. Always for you. The butterfly had shown me the way forward. It wasn't about forgetting the pain or pretending it didn't exist. It was about letting love and resilience coexist with loss. Emily's life, though far too short, had left a mark on the world, and I would carry that mark with me for the rest of my days. It wasn't triumph, and it wasn't closure, but it was survival. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.